Thank you, FROMily. We are back with another recap of our favorite, where are we, show, From. I'm your host, Anthony, and I'm going to do my best to be your guide in this show as we're picking up right where we left off last week after the death of Toby, Jean, and Deputy Kenny's father, Mr. Lou. Now, this week's episode is titled Choosing Day, which is a great title as the residents of this town are forced to make all sorts of choices in this week's episode. Now, the phrase choosing day doesn't really have any recognized origin or historical reference, so yeah. In From, it just feels like it's a way to highlight the literal and the metaphorical choices that these characters have to make in this week's episode. From Julie to Frank to Sheriff Boyd, and even Jade has to make some hard choices in this one. Now, it's extremely appropriate as we begin to learn more about the characters in this show. But first, do me a favor. If you are new here, please consider giving this channel a like and subscribe to keep up with our weekly From analysis and breakdown, and enable those notifications so you're able to watch these videos right after they publish in order to help get you prepared for Season 2. Now, back to From. This episode of From continues the trend of opening with some stunning scenes. This time we start off in that big house full of hippies with one guy smoking a weed pipe and a couple just a few feet away getting busy in the middle of the living room while everyone sleeps. Interestingly, there's no actual nudity in this scene with the exception of this woman's butt. We pan around until we come along the RV family who are sleeping in the living room on some mattresses on the floor. And it seems like the mom, Tabitha, is having a nightmare about their horrific first night. She wakes up from the nightmare and sees that her family is okay, but now if you look closely at this moment, you'll see that Tabitha seems to be wearing a shirt with a bunch of people on it. This shirt reminds me of the kind of shirts that families give out at family members during a reunion, like a family reunion, which is normally nothing to pay attention to except that the family on her shirt appears to be a black family? Whose shirt is this? We know Tabitha's stakes are still in the RV, so they're likely wearing someone's clothes from Hippie House. There's also not a ton of black people in Fromville, so I can't help but wonder whose shirt this belongs to. Maybe Ellis? This might be an interesting fact to revisit in the future, but for now, let's just try to keep this in the back of our minds with all the other things we're going to try to remember. We then switch to the high guy who's finally waking up, screaming for his friend Toby, when the lady in charge, Donna, comes bursting into the room to tell him to shut the F up before he wakes up the whole house. He threatens Donna to untie him from his bed straps, but Donna lets him know that he's actually kind of powerless. Donna then begins talking to him about how today is going to be the worst day of his life. We then switch to Sheriff Boyd, who is waking up, and we see that the sheriff seems to be experiencing muscle spasms in his hand. He then gets up and takes a look at his box-like structure outside his window and gives it a hard stare. We then switch to a little bit later when the sheriff is dressed and seemingly getting ready to start his day in town. We also see that the bad dad, Frank, is being held in a room in sheriff's office in what looks like their makeshift jail. The sheriff tries to talk to him, but Frank is non-responsive. They talk a bit about what will happen tonight, and then they talk about Frank's wife, Lauren, and how she liked the sheriff. Frank and Sheriff Boyd continue talking, and the sheriff asks Frank if there's anything he wants to do and if he wants to tie up any loose ends. Frank tells him that there is one thing he'd like to do. We then switch back to the high guy, sitting in the kitchen of Hippie House talking to Donna. He seems to have heard the whole story about what's happening, but high guy is in utter disbelief. He laughs about the situation as he definitely feels like that none of what he's heard is sincere. High guy thinks that this is a real-world role-playing game, kind of like that show Westworld, in which he has to solve a puzzle. He also theorizes his friend Toby invested in making this place seem real and that his friends spent a fortune. We then switch to High Guy heading outside where he sees someone riding a bike and he immediately hijacks this person's bike, the Grand Theft Auto style, and rides off. We then switch to the little boy, Ethan, staring out the window and looking at the creepy creature kid dressed in all white outside, still waving at him. Ethan asks if he can go outside today and how he's tired of waiting around the house. We learn that the dad, Jim, went to the RV to get some of their things and that mom is trying to corral the kids and get them ready to start their day. Julie and Tabitha walk off and Ethan finally waves back at the kid dressed in white outside the window. We then switch to the diner that Sarah works at to see Deputy Kenny talking to his mother after the passing of his father. His mom seems to be processing the death by burying herself in work and stresses how they have so much stuff to do for the day ahead of them. The mom accidentally knocks over a glass and it shatters. She tries to clean it up with her bare hands when she accidentally cuts herself and begins bleeding. She's bleeding. What's also very interesting is that it doesn't seem like Deputy Kenny's mom speaks any English. Or at least she's preferring not to speak in English right now, as the entire conversation is had in another language with subtitles. The son consoles his mother about the passing of his father while helping her with her injury. We then see Sarah walk into the diner, who immediately springs into action to help and begins cleaning up the broken glass on the floor. And this little moment seems to be a callback to last week's episode in which Sarah was talking to her brother about picking up broken pieces of glass. This show sometimes has callbacks like this sprinkled throughout, and one of the biggest recurring themes in this show is the concept of broken glass being shattered and the attempts to repair it. I'm not 100% certain what the broken glass fully means, but I do know that we will talk about this again in Season 2. We then switch to Victor, who is outside the hippie house. It looks like it's recently rained. It rained? Wait, it rained? It rained something? Anyway, Victor has a kid's lunchbox with him outside, and he looks like he's measuring the distance of something from the house by counting his steps. We then switch to the porch of Hippie House with Fatima and Julie talking a bit, with Julie commenting how they grow their own food. Julie seems to be struggling with everything that's going on, and Fatima offers to give her a hug and console her. We then switch back inside Hippie House, and it seems like the dad is back with their things from the RV. He hands Ethan his pajamas, but then Ethan asks his dad if he brought back any books from the RV. Jim jokes a bit, but then starts pulling out some things that he brought back. The first book Jim pulls out, he doesn't mention by name, and instead immediately shoves it behind the other books. This book looks like the title is Tales of Tarabathia, or is it Trials? It's a pretty fast-moving scene, so it's very hard for me to make out the text, but if anybody else can make out what it says, please let us know what it is. Tell me in the comments. The next book is called Adventures in the Grand Gulagog by Jeff Jennings, which doesn't capture Ethan's interest. The next book he pulls out is called Flight of the Fromville, which Ethan reacts to with excitement. Now, this is very, very important. This is one of the major ones that we need to remember when talking about this show moving forward. Ethan starts off by asking his dad to make this sound. And I gotta tell you, what happens next is downright weird, as Jim starts rolling his tongue and making some sounds while dancing around the room, and getting Tabitha in on it by playing as a second Fromville. And she starts making the weird sounds too. I guess this is what Fromville sound like. What's interesting is that Ethan says that she doesn't sound like that. When he initially hears his dad making the sound, she doesn't sound like that. Julie walks in, and they try to get Julie to play with some of them too, but she's not in the mood. Donna then walks in and says that Father Khatri is here to prepare them for the choosing ceremony. We then switch to the kitchen with Father Khatri explaining that people get to choose whether they want to live in town or in Colony House, aka Hippie House. Julie is asked to stay behind and watch Ethan, and after a little protest, she gives in and agrees. We then switch to High Guy, aka Jade, riding the bike he stole into the diner and starts making a scene as he asks everyone if this is the next part of where he finds his clues, as if this is all some sort of big game or quest.
Message!
Jade tries grabbing a plate and skipping the line, but Mrs. Lou, Deputy Kenny's mom, objects and hits him over the hand and begins berating him in another language. Sarah is also here and is serving food to people when she rushes outside to intercept her brother from coming into the diner. Now, her brother is upset that she came to the diner, but she explains that people would have worried if she didn't come in today and that she needs to help. Her brother clearly doesn't like it, but he eventually gives in. We then switch to Father Khatri showing Jim and Tabitha around town. While walking and talking, he explains how the talismans work and to be careful with the children. They talk a bit more about how people seem normalized to everything. They then see what the town refers to as the box. Tabitha asks about the box, and Father Khatri explains that this is the town's only form of punishment. When someone does something that leads to the death of a resident of town, then the only punishment will be to spend the night in the box without a talisman. And tonight will be the first time they use it, which creeps Tabitha, Jim, and me out about the box. I've seen y'all memes about the box. Chill, alright? This is serious stuff. We then switch to Father Khatri, Jim, and Tabitha making their way into one of the houses in town. It's not much, but it's a home. Jim notices that it looks like someone is already living here, and Father Khatri explains that there was an incident. And then he takes them upstairs to see the murder scene where Frank's family, Lauren, and Megan died. Jim, Tabitha, and me are rightly freaked the F out all over again, with Tabitha just walking out of the house immediately. Tabitha is not with any of this, but Jim tries to calm her and explains that if Frank and his family had followed the rules, then none of this would have happened. Tabitha then snaps back and asks Jim a very important and interesting question when she says, "Why are you so willing to take any of this at face value?" Jim tells her it's because of his experience overnight in the RV, and he's able to calm her down for a bit when we switch to Sheriff Boyd and Frank walking through the forest. We see that Frank had built a swing for his daughter in the forest and explained how she loved it. He asked the sheriff to confirm that they will bury him next to his family, and the sheriff confirms he will, which is, oof, this scene is kind of emotionally tough. Like, one bad night ended up like this, like, woof. We then switch to Ellis putting the finishing touches on a crutch that he's given to Ethan. Ethan tries out his crutch, takes a few steps, and mentions that it hurts his armpit when Ellis adds a little extra padding for comfort. And wait, am I the only one surprised that this boy is on his feet? Like, I'm no doctor, but poor little Ethan had a metal rod impaled through his leg, like a thick one. I didn't even see Ethan eat since this happened, so where's this little boy getting the strength to stand? No answers are given, but Ethan is taking steps and walking downstairs and everything. Julie is also there with Fatima and asks, why are they helping? And Fatima says it's just what they do. We then switch to High Guy, aka Jade, eating some breakfast with Deputy Kenny, and Jade is still fascinated by his perceived quest. Kenny doesn't seem at all amused right now, and honestly, who can blame him, as he's definitely still in a state of mourning over the loss of his father. Jade is talking out loud and mentions that he was given the rundown by Donna about the monsters that come out at night, but he states that there are a couple of flaws to the logic of this place. Jade mentions how he's sitting here in a diner eating eggs in a place that's supposed to be a mystical nightmare, and jokes that Kenny will tell him that they have chickens running around in the forest. Kenny surprisingly confirms Jade's statement and also adds that they don't really know where the chickens and cows come from. Jade doesn't seem to take any of this seriously, but then he asks Kenny if he's supposed to get a clue or anything from Kenny right before he leaves. Dr. Christie walks into the diner as Jade is leaving and says that she came to check on them. She also asks about Kenny's mom, and Kenny mentions that denial is a major part of their family tree. Christy consoles him a bit, and then they hold hands while staring into each other's eyes. We then switch back to Victor, who is still outside a colony house, seemingly measuring something. Ethan walks up to him and asks him, what are you doing? Victor doesn't seem to want to talk to him and tells him to go away. But Ethan is persistent and continues asking questions, even offering to help Victor with whatever he's doing. Victor is concerned that Ethan's going to get him in trouble for hanging around Ethan, and Donna will punish him by cutting him off from his supply of peaches. Ethan and I are both confused on what the hell this man is even talking about. Peter doubles down and tells Ethan to go away when Ethan asks Victor if he's seen the boy who lives out here. As he's speaking, I notice Ethan's Canadian accent a little stronger whenever he says a boat. But anyway, the boy is walking around out here and we never see him inside. Victor now seems genuinely interested in what Ethan has to say, now that he's heard him mention the boy, and even goes as far as to tell Ethan what he's doing. He's checking to see if the trees have moved. Julie then comes out onto the porch and urges Ethan to come inside and away from Victor. Victor tells Ethan to tell the boy that he said hi, and then continues measuring as Julie and Ethan head inside. We then switch back to High Guy, Jade, riding his bike to a new location, which seems to be a little bit outside of town. He comes across what looks like some sort of cellar with white doors and heads inside. Wait, the door is white? As Jade walks inside, he turns on a light, opens a door, and then sees what looks like a super bloody corpse in some sort of closet. Body has an eerie resemblance to Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, but it's crushed by a boulder. The dead guy then turns his head and starts screaming at Jade, and Jade falls over backwards in surprise. And then he sees a weird red symbol that looks like it was spray painted on the ceiling of the room. When he looks back over to look for the corpse, all he sees is an empty room where the boulder used to be. He also sees what looks like another room behind that room with a fake wooden wall inside. It looks like a false wall. Jade does his best to gather himself. He laughs off the experience and heads out of the cellar, screaming that Toby is an effing genius. Now, something interesting to me is that Jade genuinely believes that his friend Toby could be staging an elaborate prank in the real world on his friend. I don't think Jade believes any of this is anything more than the ideas of his friend Toby come to life. And for the life of me, I can't help but wonder, what the hell did Toby and Jade do for a living in the real world? And why did he think that this was going to be something within Toby's capabilities? Like, how rich are these guys? Is this how rich people live? Do they just use their wealth for fun and extravagance in a way that there be something like this? I'd also love to know the nature of their relationship with one another and what it's like to be rich, but we don't get those answers now, and I'm still not rich. We then switch to the church that Father Kotry runs with Sheriff Boyd sitting in the pews waiting. Father Kotry comments how this is not a sight that he's used to seeing with Boyd sitting in his church, and Boyd tells him, yo, don't get used to it. Boyd begins talking about how he's not quite comfortable with putting Frank in the box overnight, and Father Kotry counters with some valid points about how things are going to fall apart if the sheriff doesn't uphold the rules. Sheriff Boyd asks Father Kotry about whether the priest should be talking to him about the virtues of mercy, and the priest ain't with it. He tells Boyd that he built a guillotine in the middle of town and wonders what people will think once they realize that he doesn't have the conviction to use it. Boyd seems to give in and curses out loud about how Father Kotry is a terrible effing priest. Effing worst, and wanders off, and comments about how he's cursing in the Lord's house. We then switch to Boyd walking through town toward the post office, and he takes a moment to acknowledge the box, and even walks over and sits in it for a little while. We then switch to Boyd inside the holding cell in this makeshift police station, and he tosses a talisman to Frank. He tells him there's a shack about 100 yards outside of town and urges him to make whatever life he can for himself out there. Frank picks it up and asks the sheriff what is he going to tell everyone. We then switch to Father Kotry and a group of people gathered for a choosing day. They have an interesting setup with everyone standing in a circle around a stone table. The stone table has several rocks on it, also arranged in a circle, and the whole thing seems pretty symbolic. Like, I feel like this is some kind of deeper visual metaphor. This whole scene seems like a weird visual, and it eerily reminds me of some sort of weird ritual. The basis of the ritual is for new people to the town to choose where they will live. If they want to live in town, they choose the rock. But if they want to live in Colony House, they choose the flower. And we know how each place is different now. The sheriff interrupts the ceremony and begins talking about Frank and the box and the rules. He begins making a speech about the difference between savagery and consequence when, surprisingly, Frank interrupts the sheriff and begins talking about Christmas. He tells a story about how the last Christmas he had with Megan and Lauren and how he was a good dad, and they got Megan her first dollhouse, and the whole moment is pretty sincere and touching, with Frank seeming very, very sorry for his part in his family's passing. Frank then hands the sheriff back his talisman, and he tells him that the only two things he cares about now are gone, and he just wants to see his two girls again. When Jade bursts into laughter and jokes in the middle of this moment, like, what the? Yo, Jade is a savage. The sheriff has absolutely no F's to give and grabs Jade, twists his arm, and forces him to choose between a rock and a flower, with Jade picking up a rock and choosing to live in town. The sheriff then manhandles Jade a bit more before shoving him towards Deputy Kenny, who wants to take Jade on a walk to show him something. The sheriff then asks the family, the Matthews family, to all choose between town and Colony House, with everyone in the family choosing town, except Julie, who chooses Colony House. And man, yo! And also, the speed in which Donna chimes in and says, "Girls made her choice. That's it, it's done, ceremony over." And this whole scene, the back and forth rubs me the wrong way in so many ways. First off, Julie choosing now to be rebellious deserves a nice swift foot in the ass. Donna getting sassy and even going as far as to get in between Tabitha and Julie's conversation about this, that also deserves a swift kick in her ass. She was all like, "You don't have to do that, Julie," because I thought Tabitha was being too nice in this moment, only telling Donna, "No, I am not talking to you," because for real, she should have been talking to Donna with her hands. Like, Julie ends up going to Colony House, with Sheriff Boyd letting the family know that his son Ellis will be there too, and he's going to keep an eye on Julie, with, the group wrapping it up for the day since it's almost dark outside. But man, I'm sorry, y'all. This scene triggered me. Like, Julie, Donna, we need to fight. We then switch back to High Guy, Jade, and Deputy Kenny on a walk through the nearby cemetery. Kenny lets Jade know that nobody is trying to be cruel to him, as Jade is being irate after getting manhandled by Boyd. Kenny then reveals the body of Toby as they're preparing to bury him, and Jade goes through, he goes through the stages. He goes through some disbelief, he goes through some disgust, and finally, acceptance when he gives Toby a really, really good look. Jade breaks down and even starts to ugly cry hard when he realizes Toby is really gone. Real quick, I still can't help but wonder, what is the relationship between Toby and Jade? I mean, I think a lot of us just assume that they were business partners and friends on a buddy road trip after selling their business, but this scene here honestly makes me wonder what their exact relationship was. Were they just business partners out celebrating? Are they childhood friends? Are they lovers? Toby's passing hits Jade hard, and this one has me scratching my head. We then switch back to town with Sheriff Boyd and the priest, Father Kotri, walking with Frank out of the post office / sheriff station. It's now time for Frank to face his punishment for his crimes and to go in the box in the middle of town overnight without a talisman. Frank asks the sheriff to promise that he's going to get these people home, and then tells him that he's ready. Frank enters the box, and Boyd promises him that he's going to get these people home, and he locks it up, and everyone begins to leave. We then switch inside the diner with Kenny's mom, Mrs. Lou, closing up for the night. As she's heading out of nowhere, one of the jukebox thingies on the diner tables, it turns on by itself, and it starts playing music. The song that's playing is "If It Be Your Will" by singer Leonard Cohen, but this might be the cover that was done by Jan Arden. The original song was released by Leonard Cohen on his 1984 album Various Positions. The album was recorded at Quadrasonic Sound in New York in the summer of 1983 with Leanne Unger engineering. There was also a small core of musicians from a group called Slow Train that backed Cohen on the album. I think this song is somber but fitting, as we have a lot of people accepting their fates and situations at the moment. The song plays as Jim, Tabitha, and Ethan make their way into the house given to them, and Jim hangs his talisman on the wall for the night. We then switch to Mrs. Lou mourning next to a shrine of her late husband. When Deputy Kenny walks in and introduces Jade, who will be staying with them for a few days. Jade, thankfully, doesn't have anything to say at this moment. It's too emotional. I'm glad he didn't break it up. We then switch to Tabitha tucking Ethan into bed for the night, with the family coming together to have a good nighttime read of Flight of the Chromanocle. Jim starts reading aloud from the beginning, and it starts off with, "It all began one sunny morning as a cat laying perfectly basking in the sun." We then switch to Colony House with the residents welcoming Julie to their home. Mazel tov. We then switch to Sheriff Boyd looking at the empty cell that Frank had been occupying the last few days. We then switch to Frank inside the box, slowly pacing and peeking out of the peepholes when he notices the arm of someone standing outside, followed by some voices. We switch back to Sheriff Boyd contemplating about looking out the window, and he's just muscling up the courage to do it. We then switch back to Frank, who is slowly being surrounded by the people creature monsters standing outside. Frank is overcome with fear and just sits down, rocking back and forth when From gives us a good old jump scare and they come and woo! Yo, they came, and end credits, and wow, there was a lot this episode. Frank, I feel like I just got to get to know you and then you had to go in the box. Julie, can someone please slap some sense into Julie, because she gotta know she wrong for splitting up the family. Jade. Someone just slapped Jade, because my guy was over here doing the most this episode, interrupting speeches and laughing at inappropriate times. And Donna? I don't think I like this Donna chick here. Did I tell you that scene irked me when the family had to choose and she kept mouthing off? I swear, Boyd was all of us in that moment when he told her to just shut the F up. But yeah, this episode brought us further along into the mystery as we're learning more about the rules of this place, the rules of town, and the two different communities or sub-communities here. Colony House seems to be a lot of fun, but I don't like the way that they be over here acting like they can't get these hands. But that's just me. What did you all think of this episode? Did you like choosing day and the choices they made? What could have Boyd done differently to save Frank's life? Do you agree with all of the decisions in this episode? Let me know in the comments, because that's where we're going to be. But that's all I have for this one. Do me a favor. If you're new here, please give this video a like and give our channel a subscribe. This way you can join us every week as part of the FROMily, and we can put our thinking caps on together to piece together the mystery of this show. Otherwise, I'm going to have to check you all later. Peace.